Defining appetite for risk now ranks high on the list of priorities for many insurers. Increased focus on risk appetite is being driven by both internal and external forces. These include rating agencies and regulators, as well as the need by companies to incorporate enterprise risk management into their strategic decisions. A risk appetite statement can help assure all of the company's stakeholders that the organization has clearly established boundaries for overall risk-taking and decision-making. As part of our continuing thought leadership series on how insurers can successfully embed enterprise risk management into their business, I'll be discussing why risk appetite is such an essential element of a company's ERM program with my colleague Joe Lebens. Joe, what exactly is risk appetite and why is it so important?
In the simplest terms, risk appetite defines a company's attitude towards risk-taking and the implicit risk-reward trade-off. A company's risk appetite is a qualitative statement that articulates its overall risk-reward profile. A risk appetite statement should answer three basic questions. What types of risk is the company willing to assume? How much risk is the company prepared to assume? And given that level of risk, what is a reasonable rate of return that should be expected or targeted? In short, a risk appetite statement defines what I like to call the risk personality or risk profile of the company. Risk appetite communicates to the company's stakeholders about its overall risk strategy and mode of operation. More specifically, a risk appetite statement describes where along the risk-return spectrum the company aims to be. Does the company want to be a firm that seeks average returns for average risk, or is it a high-risk, high-reward organization, or somewhere else along the spectrum? Having a risk appetite statement takes the guesswork out of the equation for stakeholders and sets their expectations appropriately, which can be extremely important. An example of a risk appetite statement might be along the lines of, we aim to serve and protect our policyholders by maintaining strong capitalization while targeting an above-average return. Our risk appetite requires that we maintain strong ratings while assuming and managing risk commensurate with our stated above-average return. Risk tolerance is a high-level quantitative statement that articulates the amount of risk an organization is willing to accept in the aggregate or occasionally within a certain business unit or for a specific risk category. It can be measured and is often expressed in acceptable or unacceptable outcomes or levels. An example of a risk tolerance statement might be the company will manage itself to a maximum economic capital budget of $100 billion, or the company will not risk more than 10% of its economic value in any one year. Risk tolerance describes the company's risk appetite in quantitative terms at the enterprise level. Risk limits are similar to risk tolerance in that both are quantitative descriptions of how much risk is acceptable. Risk limits, however, are set at a more granular level within the organization and are determined by management. Management can then verify that the aggregation of the risk limits falls within the company's stated risk tolerance and risk appetite. Risk limits can be applied at the front line by individual managers who understand how much risk they can take within their respective lines of business or functions.